Being in despair is no excuse. Even in San Francisco, where you once stepped on a bird's carcass, if you want to capture loneliness, you have to remember meteors stabbing into the earth at Spruce Beach in Elliott Lake, her eyes shutting when stung by the disease she was born with. You miss being on the road more than you miss your deflated sense of self-worth. You feel a little guilty having littered the shores of the Bow Valley River with half-smoked cigarettes. But it was necessary. Taking the biggest dump of your life in a mushroomed Kentucky Fried Chicken bathroom somewhere in Ohio was essential if you were to keep going. Back in Canada, they thought you were a tank for drinking Grey Goose vodka straight from the bottle. You used to proclaim that monogamy was a myth. You also proclaimed, to the dismay of high school kids, that rancid were posers. Those lily dicks would freeze out there in the Rockies with their cut-off denim jackets, with their anthem slogans written for the already dead. Before you left Mount Robson, David told you he was writing a book that he knew one day would be mentioned in the same breath as another book. That was Lake Louise. You learned stone masonry to cut through the pork. Writers washed dishes and tried to make the perfect grilled steak instead of right. It was bliss. Alcohol and Australians, Kiwi guitars and trips to Banff. You were uninteresting when people would just get to know you. Being socially awkward was easy if you worked hard at it every day. The three girls from Gatineau, Quebec made all of this clear after you hit on them in a Chicago hostel. The wine was bitter. Your beard was long then. Too long for the Japanese girl who you taught Thumb Master before getting drunk at Club to Go with drinks on the house, courtesy of the bartender who loved his neighbors to the north. You had your long johns on and they stank of smoke. It wasn't like Omaha, where the only girl in sight was a 17-year-old on the run from Vegas for attempted murder. If you want to capture loneliness, you have to remember the hug she gave you before the cops chased her down behind a convenience store, the kiss she blew you, her hands cuffed and losing blood. Thanks. That poem was called Back in Canada. It's from my first chapbook called Portraits, published by Inwards. And I think there's some copies here tonight if you want to look at it. Some thanks are in order. Thank you, first of all, to Art Poetry Magazine for having me here, and thank you to Monty Reed and Chris Johnson and Sylvia Legree, although she isn't here. Thank you also to Matt Jones, Avonlea Fotheringham at VerseFest, and of course all of you for coming and for your kind attention. Thick skin. We had a secret code of body language. Furrowed brows and glances depending on the time of day. I am frightened that I never questioned my own answers. Even when you never asked, but if you did ask, I would have slumped in the dark sheets behind the drawn drapes and spit. I am sending this to you as a reminder for what needs no reminder. As if I could describe the bent knees of bedposts, the hard pit of my curveless organ, the paper-thin walls that barred not sound, but figures. It was you who, without blame, wrapped me in the disheveled fur, sticky from sweat and ambrosia and the silent sighs of my deadened laugh. It was you who knew my own sense of smell could not recognize the stillborn between our legs, the ghosting murk of womanhood that was more natural to me than how the sun sank. You changed, impeccably crept in the walls, like waking from a fever suddenly cured, and for once I became afraid. I slept in the dreamsake inside your chest, but could not dig in the thick skin of your rib cage, where unfinished notes to yourself lurked in gasoline. Where were the letters you took? Where were the letters when you took my virginity? Crammed in the empty orifices, fished out with your tongue and stapled to the creases of my knees. The mind is empty now. The code is broken. I know, because I have broken it through some distant eyes. This next poem is called Last Hour, and it appears in the newest issue of ARC. I was very fortunate to participate in the Poet in Residency program. So, Last Hour. Between you and the door there is a knot of teeth. Shards of your hair caught on two hanging nails. Somehow you can tell the future in my tiny hands. I learned how to do this in the kiln of creation. There are parts dangling from the bends of your knees. Your boyfriend, a sculpture made of discarded soapstone. Last night we watched a movie about Sylvia Plath. You sided with Ted Hughes, and I sided with poetry. They are as deceiving as a tiger on the edge of a cliff. Tell me why I am, if you can read my invisible throat. Later, I will text you the recordings of a tree growing. Before you go, I'll bury myself in a dried riverbed. There is a party tomorrow, and I'll see you there. Never be ashamed of what you willingly devour. So I'm going to read one more. It's a suite. It's kind of long, but I'll make sure to finish before my time's up. So thank you for listening. It means a lot to me. Passages. Pierre, Jamie, and Rachel. Incomplete. This starts with an epigram. Burn yourself up completely, like a good bonfire, leaving no trace of yourself. And that's by Shunryu Suzuki. 1. With our fingernails, we carve our names in a boulder. Each letter is an admission of sickness. 2. The forest is smaller than our bodies. There, on the edge of the only cliff, is a trail of fire. Only the brave tell stories of their singed skin. The dead only breathe through brackish soil. We mark the trail's entrance with my scarf tied in a noose. 3. We rate our level of sickness on a scale from 1 to 10. The trees howl at the floor, some whimper. Each minute is another synapse desperate to reach a lover. We can bear the label of language, but not of measurement. 4. Pierre is talking in his sleep, acting out a dream. He writhes in sun-laced mud, fully clothed. He rubs his face and head with both hands and chokes. Hands to hold, to push, to take, to keep, to touch, to talk, to give, to offer, to hurt, to move, to grasp, to encapsulate, to rip, to cover, to build, to dismantle, to sew, to carve, to signal, to point the way. 5. Rachel gives me a box wrapped in birch bark. This is for listening to the snow melt from my chest. I unfurl the birch, collect the scraps. All of this will be good for burning. I open the box and find a waveless lake. A beaver flaps its tail. A loon washes its head. 6. My body washes to a shore of deer antlers. Jamie jigs to the periphery of a clear cut punctured by stumps. He counts the ages of the dead, hula hoops the rings of time. My hands are carved from axe blades. His voice comes not from sound, but inside. 7. It was really nice meeting you. Signed, Rachel. Rachel left her son on an owl's branch. She trusts only fixed eyes. Her note is written on the skin of a heel callus, a small piece. Fold it in 4, place it inside a hummingbird wing. It falls in a flower bed. Rachel leaves only her footprints in the moss. 8. Jamie and I list everything we love, side by side. Slivers, horoscopes, Cohen's, horsetails, blueberries, lips, books, orchestras, cedar smoke, crayons, cats, red wine, kissing, timelessness, hot baths, cookie batter, damp moss, loon calls. Jamie forgot sleep. I have loved and I have kept my eyes open. I am somewhere half alive, waving to the sleepless me. 9. Pierre is a reflection of moon-bent sunbeams, inside out. He sees himself in dreams, scrapes chunk of cloud sky. When his eyes open, he is still sleeping. We ask Pierre, do you dream of the moaning morning? Do you dream of hands that lay you down in grass? His mouth opens to speak, each tooth carved into a dream catcher. 10. I was a lily pad hovering above water. I was water. Now trees line the lake and cut themselves down with saw-toothed tongues. From sky, a dark bird lays a pine branch upon the glistening rock. Eventually, we will wither. A dream is a dream only because it feels real. 11. I bet Jamie a moose tongue. You cannot finish a coal drawing under an hour. Almost instantly, Jamie finishes a rock painting, less than a moment. He holds the rock above his head like a square halo. It is a mirror reflecting tiny hands, severed fingers. 12. We can leave the forest when we know why it grows around us. Ask a bird why it flies and it will disappear. Slip a seed inside your palm like a sliver and see what grows there. Jamie lies sleepless in the trunk of a dead cedar. Pierre wraps himself in the cold of a perpetual dream. Rachel draws a door in the wet moss and walks through it. 13. I tie a dandelion stem into a knot. If it unties itself within our season, we will know we have been loved. Saplings begin to yawn, push out the first leaves. 14. I float toward the trail of fire with a handful of birch bark. I hold my new scarf and I look upon the threshold. Here is everything I owe you. Before I go, you should know that I am going. Thanks so much.